Why do I have to prove that I'm a woman?
So I've really appreciated this young lady's videos on this topic. So to get you up to speed, she is a cis woman who has a lower voice and a lesbian. And despite that, she still has men who are heterosexual coming to her page asking her if she's transgender and essentially saying to her that straight men have the right to verify this information because they're heterosexual and because they need to make sure that the women that they're attracted to are biological women, right? Mind you, this person is a lesbian, has no interest in heterosexual men or what heterosexual men are doing, but is still expected to pander to them and their sensibilities. I'm going to break down something that I have observed as a transgender woman when it comes to this, because I think it's going to piece a lot of things together. Something that you recognize as a transgender woman is that men have this incredible degree of entitlement to women's bodies. And you recognize this when you interface with men platonically, right? You interface with them completely platonically and have no sexual attraction to them. But there are still some people who may look at that interaction and feel that because this man is heterosexual and you are a transgender woman and he may potentially find you attractive, that you need to tell him that you're transgender so that he can make sure that he isn't accidentally attracted to a transgender woman. Something I've been thinking a lot about is how a lot of times what bigots say about any of the marginalized minorities that I'm part of is it's projection, right? Because how do cis white hetero men who don't like trans women tend to talk about trans people, especially the ones who look like me? That we are perpetual victims who want everything to be handed to us. We want everything to be presented to us on a silver platter. But in all reality, patriarchy teaches a lot of cis hetero men that women are to exist in their lives, served to them on a silver platter. A lot of these men, really what they're angry about, has to do with them being attracted to trans women that they did not know were transgender. For a lot of men, this is both an area of extreme anxiety and sexual desire for them. What do I mean by that? A lot of men define themselves by their relationships with women and their ability to get women. You see this very loudly expressed on social media, especially right now, where men are being celebrated for being able to get a bunch of OnlyFans models to sit on their podcast, right? There's this idea that a man is more masculine if he's able to acquire many women, a lot of women, or is particularly good with women. So if a man is attracted to a woman and that woman turns out to be transgender, that is supposed to be a mark against his masculinity. And in a society that is as misogynistic as ours is, where patriarchy is as normalized as it is all of our responsibility to make sure that a man's ego is never bruised. Now, if you're like me, you can accept the premise that two people can exist in this world and be in conversation, maybe even where people are attracted to each other, but that doesn't mean that they're in a relationship or necessarily pursuing anything. Personally, I'm a very openly trans person, obviously, because I have a platform, but in my daily life, it is definitely something that I don't announce, that some people who don't know me through my work find out slowly but surely, right? I typically tell people that I'm transgender when I feel safe, because that is actually the parameter that suits me, right? That acknowledges me as a mutual party in this relationship, right? But men who are raised with patriarchy, cis hetero men who are raised with patriarchal understandings of the way that they're supposed to relate to women, they don't look at it like that. They think that they are supposed to be entitled to every little bit of information purely because they are a man and you are a woman. I've been in situations where I've known someone platonically, I've just had a lot of conversations with them and smiled in their direction. And other people have told that person that I was transgender so that they could not pursue me, I suppose. Meanwhile, I was not interested. And I point this out because this goes back to the original point, right? It should be something that people recognize, that this lesbian woman who isn't attracted to men, has no interest in men, is still being expected to cater to men and pander to them, even though she herself does not desire a relationship with them. That's because a lot of men don't really look at women as being valid until they're in relationship with a man, right? That comes from them looking at the relationships in general as not valid unless it includes a man, right? This is a conversation we have all the time in the context of sapphic relationships, lesbian relationships explicitly, right? There's always this kind of subtle suggestion that men must validate, men must define. Everything outside of a man's definition, every outside of a man's validation, like it doesn't matter if I'm not attracted to this man. It doesn't matter if I have no interest in this man. It doesn't matter if I have a boyfriend or several that I don't want to, include in any sort of relationship I have with them. It matters that this man is attracted to me and he wants something from me and I'm supposed to give it to him. Right? We have a lot of comfort socially around this idea that trans women are supposed to give this information to men immediately purely because they're attracted to them. But I feel the need to point out that a lot of the attitudes around this don't really have anything to do with trans women at all. Yes, they're including and focusing on trans women, but really we're just the easily disposable minority right now. The way that men have this degree of entitlement to women's bodies is something that we should not ignore. It is not, as a woman sits in the hospital, brain dead but pregnant, we really do need to recognize that a lot of men really do view women as tools, right? We do need to think about this. And that is why they have such discomfort with trans women. Firstly, because if they objectify them, it says something about their masculinity. But also, trans women cannot be used as tools in the same way that cis women can be used as tools, right? Like, yes, I mean, men have leached labor from me for most of my life. So there are some ways, but especially when it comes to the ways that are becoming increasingly scary, right? Pregnancy, right? They can't be used in that way. And so when I think a lot of men, I think a lot of men, when they say these things to cis women, they don't actually think that these cis women aren't women. They think that these cis women are going to be offended by the idea of being compared to a transgender woman and therefore make themselves more typically feminine, which will always mean smaller, with a higher voice, less hair, and more childlike. Because that's kind of the natural result of what patriarchy cultivates. Because usually the only type of women who are able to not have any sort of input in their relationship, not have any sort of like experience or preference and stuff, children. It's children, right? And so they want to pressure you to become more childlike and use transgender women in order to do that, especially because transgender women are a direct challenge to this idea that there are these black and white roles, this man side, this woman side that doesn't cross over at all, right? These are all tied into the same conversation, and I want for people to not lose sight of that.
Why do I have to prove that I'm a woman? Dude, I don't even talk to men. I like women.